voila, it seems to be happening, David. And the universe seems to be rewarding you in small ways because the same day that the universe welcomed Zohran Mamdani, it expelled Dick Cheney. And you and I have the gray hairs, and we know what a horrific human being he is. Do not listen to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris tweets. He was a terrible person. David is also the editor and co-founder of the fantastic webpage Substack, The Lever, which is on Ghost, does fantastic reporting. And The Lever did this great series called The Master Plan, which was now then put into a book, and the book has become a bestseller. I've had David on before speaking about the Master Plan. What I call the Broligarchy vampire is just completely draining all of us of our resources and creating this techno-fascist white Christian nationalist empire for the 1%. All part and parcel of the plan. David and his team of investigators just literally laid out the plan for you, and voila, it seems to be happening in real time. So we'll talk about that. But first, David, I haven't talked to you since the election. Your take?
Well, my take is that populism is the new centrism. There's been a lot of us who've been talking about how economic populism, as opposed to the old neoliberalism pushed by the Democratic Party, that populism is what voters actually want, and Democrats can win on that. And I think that's what you saw across the country. I mean, and by the way, with different candidates of different political brands. I think obviously Zohran Mamdani ran on an economic populist, anti-oligarch, anti-billionaire agenda, but also in New Jersey and Virginia, candidates who bill themselves as conservative Democrats, they also ran on populist themes, even though they kept their brand as, conservative slash moderate Democrats. So you're hearing a debate in the media, uh, moderate conservative Democrats won in blue states like New Jersey and Virginia, and a Democratic Socialist won in New York. But I think those labels are actually more confusing than they are clarifying. Because essentially, what to my mind has happened is that these terms, centrist, moderate, conservative, when applied to Democrats, they're not really describing the through line here. And when you look at Mickey Sherrill when she ran for New Jersey governor, and by the way, when she thought she was going to lose, when she was freaking out about her polls going down, all of a sudden out came the Bernie Sanders style populism saying we are going to declare an emergency and cap electricity rates. When Abigail Spanberger in Virginia was afraid she was going to lose when the polls did a dip, all of a sudden out came the ad saying that Donald Trump and his budget were destroying Virginia on behalf of billionaires. So I think what we're actually seeing is the conservative, moderate brand of Democrat embrace and in practice effectively admit that the politics that I've been talking about and that you've been talking about for years is actually the mainstream election winning center of this party. So in a sense, they'll never admit it, right? They're never going to admit that the Bernie Sanders, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, populist wing of the party is correct has been correct on economics, right? But when you see them essentially embrace those themes to win elections, that is effectively what they are admitting. Even Barack Obama, like Mr. Moderate, mainstream, centrist guy, was out on the campaign trail with Abigail Spanberger saying that he's worried about corporate consolidation, too much economic power in the hands of too few, right? Like even he is in practice effectively admitting this. So I think this is like, in a sense, a bigger admission and turning point than perhaps it's even being understood to be as, in the sense of, it was a rejection of Trump. Now, I want to be clear. I do think that we oftentimes overly storify these election results because what happened is too boring. I would say at least half of what happened, certainly in New Jersey and Virginia, is that the opposition party inside of states already dominated by the opposition party's voters are almost certain to win statewide elections when the Republican Party is in the White House, right? I mean, how much these races are nationalized, we have to really truly understand. So I guess I would also say there's this other point here, which is that I think the Democrats basically could have nominated almost anybody to run for in New Jersey, to run in Virginia, and they almost any nominee would have won those races in this situation at this particular time, which underscores how important primaries are, right? That who the Democratic Party, especially in blue states, who the Democratic voters are choosing to make their nominees in essentially almost guaranteed situations where they're going to win the general election helps determine the overall direction of the party. And so I do think, in one sense, there's a kind of missed opportunity to not
Yeah,
nominate more progressive populist candidates in blue states
absolutely.
who are almost certainly going to win those general elections. But again, I go back to my point that even in nominating these so-called conservative moderate Democrats in New Jersey and Virginia, when they're campaigning on Zohran Mamdani-esque themes, that is them essentially. At one level, you could say, well, they're appropriating, they're stealing the agenda of their ideological opponents inside the party. I would say at the other, I take the different view. If they are picking up those politics, if they are championing those politics, and certainly everybody has to hold them accountable to those promises that they made, but if they are championing those politics, they're essentially bending the knee.
Yeah, good for them. Do it. Parrot it.
Right.
Lock
Exactly.
them.
Like that's a big win. Welcome to the party.
Yeah, welcome to the party. Expand the tent. You get it. Wonderful. You are a tool that is no longer dull. We've sharpened you and refined you. You can be useful. Those who are dull and haven't gone with the program, you're now an ossified tool. Like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries will replace you because I think you agree with me. We've talked about this before, where we don't idolize and worship politicians. We see them as tools, levers, the word you use to pull, right? And they are instruments of the people. I don't worship Mamdani. I never have. I've never worshipped Obama. He behaved exactly like how he thought I would behave, which is why I wasn't as disappointed. I'm like, he's going to be a center leftist accommodationist. However, I do think his victory was very important, especially since we're dealing with the rise of white nationalism, to see that biracial man, a man who had to endure such hate, much like Mamdani, Islamophobia, even though he's not Muslim, anti-black racism. I mean, so humiliating that he had to produce his birth certificate. And that type of hateful politics didn't succeed against him, didn't succeed against Mamdani. But to unpack what you said, and I'm in Virginia, right? Uh, First and foremost, I think we have to look at the numbers and the data, right? People might be like, I don't know, Sirota's like a flaming lefty. I don't buy it. People who voted for Donald Trump in 2024 also voted for AOC. People who voted for Donald Trump in 2024 went and voted for Mamdani. How do you explain that? Because many of these people said, I don't really care about labels, Democrat, Democratic Socialist, liberal, I just want my life better. Latinos are a great example of this. I've talked to Mike Madrid about it. He said, listen, man, the Latinos in the Midwest and the West, Nevada, Texas, California. The reason why I like Bernie Sanders is not because they're Democratic Socialists, because they're like, oh, anti-establishment, wanting to make my life better. And then some of those people then voted for Trump. Then some of those people voted for Biden. Then some of those people voted for Trump. And now all those people literally have left Donald Trump, and Latino votes are back to 2016. So what we're seeing is it has less to do with fidelity, but more the person who promotes themselves, David, as the anti-establishment kind of bulldozer who's going to come in, knock out the institution, and make your life better. People are sick and tired of these institutions, which explains why someone can vote for Donald Trump. It's all bullshit, right? He's the consummate insider, but he promoted himself as an outsider, right? And then why you can vote for AOC. So that anti-oligarchy message that I've been told by Lisa Slotkin and Schumer, the average Jose worker doesn't get, they get it. They all get it, right? As you can see from the huge turnouts to the Fight Oligarchy campaign that AOC and Bernie did. That's one point I want to make, and that seems to be the message that's staring them in the face. Run against the oligarchy, run on affordability, run on an economic populist message. The second point I want to make is you mentioned this, and I feel strongly about it. I believe right here in Virginia, David, I called it. I said they're going to get a trifecta. Miaris, for those who don't follow, just stick with me for a second. Miaris was up 3 points on Jay Jones. Jay Jones was running for attorney general. He was in type of a manufactured crisis when he was a state legislator. He sent a stupid text to a Republican colleague like a dumbass, and the Republican colleague shared it with the Republicans, and they're like, he effed it up. Miaris is going to win. Huge turnaround, folks. Jay Jones ends up winning by 3 or 4 points despite that. And they got a trifecta of Ghazala Hashmi, Jay Jones, and Abigail Spanberger, right? Abigail Spanberger wins by double-digit points. Dave, the reason why I said they're going to get a trifecta is, you know this, if you're in Colorado, I'm in Virginia, you get a sense when you're on the ground. You don't trust the polls. You just get a sense. And people are in pain, David. Like this government shutdown, I said, man, Republicans overplayed. They don't realize how desperate people are, how pissed off people are. I think they just gave Jay Jones and the Democrats a trifecta. That's what happened. I think, David, and I'm not a big fan of Spanberger. She won, fine. I hear from other people saying this, David. Oh, it's Virginia's purple. It's not like New York. We needed a Spanberger and a CIA moderate centrist. I think, David, being here in Virginia with what's happening right now, especially in the past 2 months, if they had a type of progressive fighter candidate as governor, I bet you that candidate would have won by double digit points as well.
I think there's variation between the states, but I also think living in Colorado, which is a similarly blue state, everybody in politics in Colorado understands, just like everybody who probably works in New Jersey or Virginia politics understands, that the primary, whoever is going to win the primary, is almost certainly going to win the general election in a blue state at the statewide level when the current president is Republican. I mean, this is where it's hard to storify things. It's how did the Republicans win the governorship in Virginia last time? Well, Joe Biden was president. So when people walked into the voting booth wanting to vote for change, the vote for change was to vote against the party they perceived to be in power. Joe Biden and the Democrats were in power. I guess my macro point is the last many, many elections, probably starting in 2016, were essentially votes for change. Donald Trump against, the Obamaist era, right? Joe Biden against the first term of Trump. Trump against the Biden situation. And you go one level down, and the trend carries through. The voters keep voting for change because they are unhappy with the status quo that both parties are giving them. And so I think looking forward, the actual question for Democrats now, who just won office, is how do we actually prevent the voters from going into the voting booth and throwing our asses out the next time? Because now we
Moderation,
are.
centrism, David, centrism.
Right. Well, I mean, I think what you have to do is you have to look at not FDR's first election in 1932. Right? FDR was running, the Great Depression was happening, Herbert Hoover, lots of people hated. Winning in 1932 arguably wasn't that difficult. What's amazing actually is that FDR got reelected in 1936. So he then, at that point, he is the man, right? He has to defend, or he is going to take the blame. And so what does he say in that election? He said essentially not, hey, everything's now fine. Don't believe your lying eyes that the depression is happening, which is, by the way, what Biden and Harris did, right? Biden and Harris, much of their campaign was actually everything's great. People are stupid for thinking things aren't great, in 2024. That was a stupid message. The message has to be, I am trying to get done the things that I promised in my original campaign, and I have an obstruction in the Republicans, and I welcome the hatred. That was FDR's phrase. I welcome the hatred of, at that point, the oligarchs of his day who were trying to stop me from getting done what I promised to get done. In other words, you cannot accept that you are the status quo.